Welcome to For the Record. I'm Ellen Braitman. The son of a pilot and flight attendant, JetBlue chief executive Dave Barger has flying in his blood. He's just reported 2 consecutive quarters of profit for his airline, which is not typical in an industry that's bleeding billions of dollars. He says investors in airlines should brace for more losses and passengers for fewer airlines.
Our path forward is really one of organic growth. As I take a look at really the labor side of the equation, and really hiring and teaming with your own crew members as opposed to trying to merge or integrate culture, that's really difficult. And all that said, I think never say never in this industry. I think we take a look at maybe its assets, gates, slots, that type thing that could be available, as opposed to, say, purchasing somebody else's airline.
Like a U.S. Airways, though, if they said, all right, we'll do a deal.
I think when you start to get into the hypotheticals, I'd probably, of course I want to stay away from that, but I'd probably say, hey, listen, how about some gates and slots, such as at Washington Reagan, or slots, gates at LaGuardia, some of these very hard to access airports. That's within different companies' portfolios. So I think it's the hard assets that we would be very interested in.
And certainly he's looking for growth in the areas holding up best despite the downturn, including the Caribbean.
It's about 20% of your business now in terms of the seats you fly, which is interesting because you kind of think of it as a vacation spot. Is it more recession-proof?
I think the Caribbean, Latin America, we're now in South America, Central America, Mexico, and across the Caribbean. A couple things. First of all, we call it VFR traffic. So this visiting friends and relatives traffic is rather inelastic. I mean, it's pretty nice to see the communities of interest traveling Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, now Jamaica. So rather inelastic. We're going to continue growing in that part of the world. We're flying to the West Coast out of Dulles today and up to Boston, and also down to Florida, down to Puerto Rico as well.
So out west, what's looking attractive out west?
Well, it's part of our footprint as well. About 30% of our flying is between the East Coast as well as Northern California, Southern California, and we're into the Pacific Northwest as well. So those are good markets for JetBlue. It's part of our core business. A lot of New York, we just opened up Los Angeles International Airport, so LAX, in addition to Burbank and Long Beach. So it's really not a new city because it's the LA basin, but it's new service within that basin.
He's expanding service, but there's a price to pay for getting people on planes.
Travel's been on sale over the course of the peak summer season. It's going to be on sale this fall going into the winter as well. The industry is still seeing the repercussions of the economy. When you start to take a look at ticket prices on a year-over-year basis, I mean, we're seeing something that looks like 10% lower prices, the equivalent thereof. We took 9 new airplanes this year. We were scheduled for 36, and I'm really glad the other 27 aren't here. You know, where do you start to deploy those aircraft in this kind of economy?
What is the rest of 2009? What does 2010 look like?
Yeah, all the aircraft we've taken delivery of this year, and next year we don't have any deliveries scheduled at this time. I mean, at the end of the day, there's too much capacity in the industry. At the end of the day, we're still in a recession. Let's start to see some positive GDP numbers, even though we're seeing some real nice areas of growth for JetBlue, such as that Latin American discussion that we had. But it's I think this is a good time to not be growing a great deal.
Airline stocks, as we know, they're in the toilet. You're trading near book value, so the investors clearly are not paying up above the assets. How do you convince investors that you're worth more?
I think today investors are looking at, hey, you're an airline and you're just in bad space. Any way you cut it, oil, recession, from an investor perspective, you know, who wants to really invest in the airlines? It's going to take some capacity reductions, I think, in the landscape to really help investors say, yeah, it's time to get back into the industry.
Lufthansa owns about 15%
That's correct.
of JetBlue. Is that, and I know you think kind of the regulatory structure that has limits on who can own and have kind of control over airlines is a little antiquated. So are you looking to up that relationship or to get investments from other airlines?
Well, I think, first of all, the limits on foreign investment it's really a statute that's decades old now, 25% of voting shares and 49% of ownership. I'd like to see that reduced. I'm not hopeful it's going to happen tomorrow, but I do think that take a look at the auto industry and foreign investment from the German auto manufacturers, the Japanese car makers as well. I mean, the auto industry in the southern United States is fairly healthy, relatively speaking. And so I do think that over time we're going to see these limits maybe struck down such that we can see greater investment from foreign entities in the United States. And I think it's going to be very good for the industry. I think it's going to be very good for the airline employees as well overall.
Just Just 8 days after his inauguration, President Obama met with a group of CEOs, including JetBlue's. He was trying to gauge their support for the economic stimulus package. Barger had an idea how a few billion could be well spent.
We're using 50-plus-year-old technology to move airplanes. And enough's enough. If we want to talk about shovel-ready projects that are ready to go, let's invest in the next-gen system.
But it's not part of stimulus.
And it's not.
So what did you say?
Which was disappointing.
What are you asking for?
It's a $40 billion plus price tag. And I think that we're asking the White House, the administration, Secretary Geithner and Dr. Summers for the understanding that the air transportation system, to modernize it, this $40 billion price tag, let's help stimulate it. Maybe it's $10 billion to start here in the short term, but really compressing this investment. At the same time, the industry has to be on the same page. Department of Transportation, FAA, airlines, what is next gen? So that everybody knows what the project is. I think that's where the gap was, and I think that's why the airlines weren't part of the stimulus package. But I'm very confident, though, that we're going to see some investment very soon.
And Larry Summers reached out to you, it seems like, several times on this front. So do you have any kind of sense of timeline, how much of a priority this might be?
I think it's a priority. That's the timeline. I'm hopeful is sooner rather than later. And Dr. Summers is really working through the Air Transport Association, who I think put forth a very good story regarding, if you look at air traffic, at any given time between Boston and Washington, and we're right here centered in New York with JetBlue, but at any given time over the course of the day, 1 out of 5 aircraft in the world traverse this area, whether it's at low altitude, whether it's at high altitude. And so the ability to really invest and move airplanes more efficiently, to allow those airplanes to land, and what happens when the trickle-down effect, when in fact somebody starts spending in a Buffalo or they're spending down in a Richmond, let alone in New York or wherever it might be, I think that's resonating quite well down in Washington.
So you said the other topic that you brought up and talked about was fuel. Now, certainly we know one thing that's the very hot topic right now is regulating or kind of putting caps on speculators, people who are in the oil market. What's your position on this? Because this is something you've also been active in through Washington.
We've been very active, and not just JetBlue, but the industry. You know, when oil goes from $60 to $147 to $32, this isn't just China and India and, say, unrest in some geographical area of the world. I mean, there has to be more that's in play. And so I think recently what we've seen with the CFTC, with really Washington also taking a look at what's happening here with commodity speculation. And I'm not suggesting that speculation is wrong, but what about things like greater transparency, oversight, position limits? I mean, the whipsaw that took place with energy prices, 40 airlines worldwide stopped flying, 9 in the United States. Others declared bankruptcy. Others merged. And so the airlines, I mean, this is our number one cost. Other industries have the same type of challenges, but this is our number one cost. So I'm very heartened to see what's happening here with greater oversight from the standpoint of commodity, investment, and speculation.
So what are you doing? Because obviously, I mean, hedging is an important strategy. It's something that's helped you. Southwest has kind of been the leader in terms of having the right strategy on hedging. But what are you doing? Again, since this whipsaw is what we've seen, and no one has any idea what's going to happen.
Well, we're currently back into the market from the standpoint of a fuel hedging program. I think it's fair to say that we're really looking at more of a volatility type of insurance program. And so we are in place right now, about 15% of the next year's burn we have hedged, but it's really more from volatility, taking a look at the low $80 per barrel, type of a price point. Oil today, down to 62 again. We think it's going to go north. And I think the entire industry is wrestling with this because it was even more difficult to unwind or to counter swap, if you will, the hedges that we had in position as oil was moving down from 147 down to 32 because you just didn't know when it was going to stop.
So when you talk about 80, that's what you're trying to protect against?
Yeah, the current type of investments that we have or insurance that we have is oil into the mid-80 type level, but that's only over the next 12 months. Where it's going to go beyond that, Ellen, or even short term, it's really anybody's guess based on where it's been over the last couple of years.
You've taken out in some planes, right, some seats in order to use less fuel. So what other steps are you taking to use less fuel?
It's the seats actually were taken out to enhance the legroom. And the byproduct was we had less weight on the airplane. And we also had one fewer flight attendant on the aircraft as well. So 156 seats down to 150 seats on the A320. So that was really more of a customer investment. But overall, less weight on the airplane. As we take a look at our technique, things like single engine taxi. Again, the ability to collaborate with the pilots, dispatchers, technicians. You don't need two engines all the time to taxi out to the runway. Things like fuel over destination. If the weather is fine in Las Vegas, we don't have to land with 12,000 pounds of fuel. We can certainly land with considerably less fuel. And so at the end of the day, I mean, that really adds up.
Welcome back to For the Record. We were invited to one of the occasional meetings that JetBlue's top management has with employees. It's part corporate update and part pep rally.
Hey, thanks, Rob. Thanks. Thank you. How's everybody doing? Great. It's I will give a corporate update here in just a moment. And, yeah, we call it pocket sessions, and we're out at our terminal here at Kennedy Airport. And so on a regular basis, we'll fan out across the airline. Pocket sessions are really town hall meetings. It's an opportunity to update the crew members, our word for employees, on our second quarter results.
Congratulations on a 9.4% operating margin for the second quarter.
It was nice to have a profit and also talk about how we're looking at the current landscape, what's going to happen into the future. And I think most importantly, the ability to hear what's on our crew members' minds.
We've seen a number of cancellations over the last couple of weeks. You know, I'd love if you could stop cancelling JFK Chicago, and just wondered, you know, in front of the group here and the TV cameras, if you can kind of give me a response to that.
Yeah, I would like to get out of that as well.
I think what's really important, personalized leadership. Who are these people, you know, who are making decisions who have the big titles at our airline? Because it's this is not a company that is in headquarters in Mahogany Row where you can't see somebody, you know, who's making the decisions. Get down there and spend time with the people who deliver the product.
So should we go with a getaway package? Okay, we got a winner. Come on up. Excellent.
Dan Fennessy, A320FO, work here in Kennedy.
All right. Cool job. Thank you.
So I've got to assume a lot of employees ask about job safety. You guys have a no furlough policy. So have you fired no one during the downturn?
When you take a look at our no furlough policy, all crew members, and not just those who are frontline pilots, technicians, in-flight airports, reservations, no furlough policy, and we're not going to take pay cuts. Let's collaborate when, in fact, the economy all of a sudden says, hey, we've got to do something about our cost structure. And so as we take a look at, for economic reasons, we're always going to drive performance management. You know, people who aren't doing their job, that's a totally different issue. Coach them, guide them, we'll make the tough decision. But if the economy, if the business model, if something's happening where I think the traditional airlines would pull the lever on furlough, pay cuts, and sit airplanes in the desert, there's got to be a better model. There has to be. And so we have not furloughed any crew members at JetBlue.
But how do you deal with that? And is there, do you have pressure from investors, from your board to change that policy?
I think investors, certainly our board, understand the strategy. And there are investors who will ask the question. Our board absolutely understands the strategy. But how we really work through this, like last year when oil was running north and we were slowing growth, we deferred some aircraft deliveries. We sold some airplanes. We also were leasing some aircraft as well. And so as we then worked with our crew members, I think the key word is collaboration. I'll give you an example. With the pilots, or really across the airline, but pilots specifically, we ended up with a program that was called R&R. And it's relax and rejuvenation. Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it 12 months? And where in essence somebody's really taking a leave and they still have seniority, they still have medical benefits, but all of a sudden they're helping the enterprise as well by saying, hey, listen, I'll take really this R&R package for a 3, 6, or 12-month duration. We had over 60 pilots per month on a base of 1,900 pilots who said, this is for me. The same is applying in in-flight, reservations, airports, and I think it just lends itself to a much better model.
So are you hiring?
We absolutely are. This orientation last week in Orlando, where I was on the ramp loading the bag. I think it was a couple of strollers from the jetway. We had 60 new crew members, and they were in airports, and they were also in technical operations.
Are you flooded with applicants?
There is thousands of applications at JetBlue, and the hiring, no doubt, is much slower than it was in the past. Thanks for what you're doing. It's noticed day in and day out, whatever the department might be. It's now 12,000 strong across the crew member population. So how about a round of applause for all of you? We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
If it was a $20 difference, I would definitely choose JetBlue over another airline.
So we drove an extra hour and a half, essentially, just to get to Sacramento Airport so we could fly JetBlue.
There are many other planes that we could take to get to where our house is. But JetBlue lets us take dogs, and that's a very important reason why we fly JetBlue.
I watched Nickelodeon and everything, and I listened to the radio and everything. So it was a lot of fun.
Passenger revenue for U.S. airlines was down 26% in June compared to a year ago, the 8th straight drop. And so airlines continue their scramble to boost sales.
Welcome on board. So let's talk Wi-Fi.
Sure.
So you've got this test flight.
We do.
This test plane. So what are you finding? Because, of course, all of us who are addicted to our BlackBerries, we want to know when we can use them.
We think that the consumer doesn't really want to pay $9.95 for broadband, especially on a shorter stage length, maybe traveling to the West Coast. Sure, I want to log on, $9.95, $14.95, whatever it might be. But I think most people, my BlackBerry, my PDA, can I just send a quick message? Can I get my email? I don't need to pull down my attachments. We think that model is going to scale. We're going to start to outfit more of our aircraft later this year with the Wi-Fi, the narrowband.
What about cell phones?
I don't believe cell phones are going to be allowed ever aboard JetBlue.
Why?
I think when you're in a delay, that's one thing, that's fine. But at altitude, people really enjoy their space. I think they enjoy the fact that, Ellen, I don't think you want to listen to my conversation as we're crossing the country.
The focus on the customer experience isn't free of problems, such as recent issues with JetBlue's television system, Live TV.
So if you think, gee whiz, Live TV used to be a little more reliable, about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you're right, it did. I just don't want anybody, especially people who deal with this, deal with unhappy customers, in-flight crew, flight ops crew, AO crew. It's not easy, but things are getting better.
It seems like increasingly everything within the cabin is for sale. Right? There's this chatter that always comes back that Ryanair, for example, was even considering charging people to use the bathroom.
Right.
What else are you going to sell inside the plane?
Well, we look at it as we're not going to nickel and dime. And snacks, beverages, the ability to have a comfortable seat, a seat assignment, access to the TV, radio, that's part of the package, the ticket price, if you will. I think we look at what's an enhancement. You want more legroom? Great. $65 million worth of revenue this year. Investors are applauding that. So are the customers. If you want additional programming, say for premium studio-produced movies, great. We'll charge you for that. People are purchasing that type of option as well. We were just trialing meals at altitude also on longer haul. We'll be out there probably in 2010 moving into the cabin selling meals because people are wanting it. But the nickel and diming, I mean, there's no wonder so many customers can't stand airlines. I mean, the industry has been charging for everything. At the end of the day, we want to be known as an airline that's going to offer you just better value, this more proposition, and we don't want to be known as I'm going to gouge you and nickel and dime you at every opportunity because you may not come back. I want to build the relationship with you, your family, other people that you work with in the corporate environment. This relationship is key to our long-term success.
JetBlue's chief executive says he remains on track to report a profit this year despite tremendous headwinds in his industry. He says he's well positioned to pick up some of the pieces that remain from an industry shattered by the recession. For the record, I'm Ellen Breitman.